stone unturned. Leave your fears behind.
Leaving no stone unturned. It's time for truth in matters directly affecting you, America. You have a voice, and it's time to use it. It's time to Speak Now Live with Cheryl Edwards.
Welcome back. This is Speak Now Live, and I'm your host, Cheryl Edwards. My mission in bringing this program to you is to bring you topical discussions on matters directly affecting you. And I'm so glad you've joined us today for our very first show, Medication Nation. We've been joined this hour by activist, speaker, and author of the book, Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher, Gwen Olsen. If you haven't read the book yet, I want to encourage you to go out and grab a copy. You may want to grab a couple. This would be a great gift to give a loved one. One of the things that I appreciated about this book was your openness about your struggles and your relationships with your mom and your sister after the death of your niece Meg. I have to know, are you and your sister today? I mean, how are you guys doing? Are you guys good now?
This is an ongoing healing process because once someone commits suicide, there is a lot of familial blame that is shared, and everyone feels responsibility. Mm-hmm. So I believe that my sister is having still a very difficult time accepting my niece's death and for accepting all of our contributions in how we were unaware of her true mental status and what was about to happen. But no, the relationships are not healed even to this day because, again, there is just so much blame and so much pain. And I see many families that have gone through suicides that are, marriages that end and relationships, familial relationships that are severed, permanently because it's just a pain that is very difficult to deal with. Everyone feels like they should have saw it coming. Everyone feels like they should have made another choice. And quite frankly, it leaves families devastated.
Well, what happens is the person disconnects themselves. I'm the perfect example of that. When I was in the midst of my addiction, I divorced my Christ-loving husband who did nothing more than love me unconditionally. But because I was disconnected, I couldn't see that. That's what these drugs do to your mind. That's
right. That is what they do. And then you don't question, why they're taking away all of our rights, why they're telling us that there are weapons of mass destruction in other countries and why we're starting all of these wars and why gas is almost $4 a gallon and why, we don't ask enough questions. And if we're all drugged up, we're going to just do what people tell us to do, particularly when you're given a mental illness label. That just completely destroys your self-esteem. It destroys your self-respect. People start to question you all the time. You're looked at like when you're mentally incompetent, you may as well be, a child in most people's minds because you have no rights anymore, and they question everything that you do and everything that you say. So it's a great way to shut people up. It's a great way. They used to do it to dissidents. My goodness, people, look at your history. They put fluoride in the water in the concentration camps with Hitler. It's not a conspiracy theory. These things took place, and if we studied history, we might not allow history to repeat itself quite so frequently.
Just to recap, because I want to make sure that listeners understand this, there's no scientific study, there's no proven data for doctors to use to be able to accurately diagnose someone with a mental condition. Is that right?
That's right. It's just a list of symptoms that they look at, and they check off these lists of symptoms, and then you get a diagnosis based on how many of those symptoms you have.
This explains why we have a world full of crazy people. World
going crazy because
yes.
People are buying into these agendas. That's what we have. I believe that we all have a Holy Spirit. I believe that we all have the ability to rise above difficult circumstances, that we have those survival mechanisms, and I think that we also have the ability to heal our own bodies through the mind, body, and spiritual connection. So I think that a lot of our power is stripped away from us when we become dependent on drugs, and we need a paradigm shift. We had a paradigm shift, remember, in thinking about smoking. It used to be socially acceptable to smoke anywhere and everywhere. Yeah. Now it's not. Now it's all outlawed in buildings. Now you can't smoke at work. Now you can't smoke in airports. Now you can't smoke on the planes because people recognize that's a public health hazard. We have to have that same paradigm shift. It has to become socially unacceptable to pop a pill for every ill. And we need to make that shift starting with our children. We've got to stop drugging our kids because that's the easy thing to do. And we have to start becoming better parents.
Wow, Gwen. I don't think I could have said it any better. You know, I think I could sit here and talk to you all day long. I've just thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you, and I just want to thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to join me today. That says a whole lot, so thank you.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity, and I know that you have a very powerful story to share with your listeners as well. And I think that's just one of the things that we all have to do. Anyone who has this experience or this knowledge has got to start speaking out, because what you realize is there's safety in numbers, and you start to recognize you aren't alone. There are so many people out there that think they're the only ones who feel this way, or they're the only family that has this problem. And because we don't speak out about it and we don't talk to one another about it, we don't realize it's an epidemic.
Yes.
It's not you or me or the guy across the street. It's every family that you know has been touched by this problem in one way or another. And if we don't speak out and educate one another and share these experiences, you're going to be the next person that has a loved one that you lose. And then you're going to have to do this due diligence and all of this educational process on your own. So I think that if we can be proactive and just share this information, everybody who hears it today, with one other person, eventually we will all know the truth, and they won't be able to hide any of it from us anymore.
There's absolutely no embarrassment in addiction.
There isn't.
No.
There's nothing wrong with telling people what happened to you, and the fact that you were an addict, I admire you so much for being able to say that, because it only requires that you have a brain to be an addict.
Oh, thanks, Gwen.
So there's nothing wrong with you, but your brain became addicted, and psychiatric drugs are particularly designed to be addicting, as are the opiates. So that's one of the reasons that, you know, they're prescribed so openly and so much, because they are habit forming and addicting, and therefore that means refilled prescriptions, and that means more money in the till for the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, and a whole lot of it. Hey, if somebody wants to visit your website, they can go to
GwenOlsen.com, GwenOlsen.com, and I would love to sell some books today. If you haven't read my book, please read my book and share it with someone else.
Oh, yes. Even if you don't like to read, this is just one of those books that everyone should read at least once. And again, the name of the book is Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher. It meant so very much having you here today. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for what you're doing, Cheryl. And I'd like to thank your listeners for their cooperation in helping to disseminate the information. I often conclude my interviews by saying it not only takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to protect one. So please be the protectorate of your village and watch out for our kids.
You've been listening to the first radio broadcast of Speak Now Live on WFEN. I'm your host, Cheryl Edwards, bringing you discussions on topics and matters directly affecting you. Join us next week when we'll be joined by the CEO of William Charles Construction, Mr. John Lichty, will join us to talk about the Rockford landfill expansion. Have a great week.
Leave no stone unturned. Leave your fears behind.
You've been listening to Speak Now Live with your host, Cheryl Edwards. All views and opinions expressed on this show do not reflect the views of this station. For further insight and a recap of today's show, visit SpeakNowRadio.com. Speak Now Live with Cheryl Edwards, Saturdays at 1 on WFEN.